Okay.
Well, I chair.
We're okay.
Yeah, good start.
Excellent, bless you. Right, good morning. Welcome to the Audit and Governance Committee. Thank you for joining. My screen has flipped over onto, well, there are two screens of faces and images on my laptop, so it's unlikely that I'm going to be able to keep up with who's here and who's speaking, but I'll do my best. Given that we do have some new faces and some new members, I think, at least interim on the call, it might be a good idea just to do a very quick around the screen, as it were, introduction, so at least we have reference for Helen as to exactly who's here, and it's a good opportunity just for everybody just to say who they are, to say hello. So I'll start. My name's Graham Bell. I'm one of the independent members and chair of the committee. My first committee meeting was actually just over 4 years ago. I just happened to get that flagged up on my calendar as a memory. There you go. That's one of my memories. So can I ask the elected members to begin, just to maybe with Joanna, if we could just introduce ourselves from a committee point of view first.
Yes, certainly. Hello, everybody. I'm Councillor Joanna Baker-Rogers. I'm a councillor with Rotherham Council. I'm here to represent Simca, I believe. And I used to chair the Audit Committee, and I'm now a Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care and Health. I've been on this committee for a few years now. Is that right, Graham?
I have difficulty keeping up with my own movements, Joanna, but yes, yes, that's it. Right, excellent, thank you. Are there any other elected members on the call today? Claire, you're waving at me.
Yeah, I am. I'm on my phone and I'm actually trying to get in on my laptop, but it won't let me, so I might disappear. I'm Councillor Claire Carragher. I'm from Sefton Council, and I'm also the lead member for Rail and Freight on Merseytravel. So excellent. That involves the whole of the city region.
Grand. Thank you, Claire. So aside of Joanna and Claire, do we have any other elected members? No. Good. Were we expecting anybody else, Helen? Just to go back to you for a second.
Strange point in the calendar, Chair, where we are waiting on nominations. So I think for the purposes of the minutes, I'll record who's here, but we are sort of chasing up those nominations for future meetings.
Surely. Excellent. Thank you. Okay. So, Stuart, as an independent member, do you just want to introduce yourself and say hi?
Yeah, certainly, Graham. Morning to you. Morning, everyone. My name's Stuart Green. As Graham said there, independent member. Seem a little distant on this camera setup here, but yeah, pleased to see you all again.
Grand, thank you. And I'm sure I saw Richard at least once on my screen. Richard, you want to say hi?
Thank you, Chair. Hi everybody. My name is Richard Thomas, independent member. I'm the head of audit and risk for St Helens Council.
Thanks, Richard. Now, rather than take up everybody's time, I'm not suggesting that you're not all equally important as one another, but Martin, did you just want to say hi, just so that everybody has at least got the opportunity to put a face to a name?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Martin Tugwell. I'm the Chief Executive of Transport for the North, and we've got a number of colleagues, and I think maybe as we go through the items, we can introduce them then. I might just, though, by way of introduction at this point, though, Chair, just make the point that we will be joined at some point by Keith Mitchell, who's an interim finance director providing support to our interim financial controller and section 151 officer, which is Lisa. And those are changes since the last meeting, and it's worth particularly mentioning those given the relationship between this committee and the finance team.
Brilliant, thank you, Martin. I should have mentioned that, but yeah, bless you. In terms of content, and it's been some time since we've had an online call, and obviously personalities have changed in that time. Please don't expect me to share everybody's papers and presentations. Maybe it's unfair to expect Helen to do that either. So if when it comes to your own section, if you are able to share your paper and administer it from your end, that probably works best. But if you do have any problems, doubtless Helen can launch something on your behalf. Please nod, Helen, if that sounds like an acceptable plan. Brilliant. That was half a nod. I'll take that. Great, thank you. Now, in terms of the formal elements, I think Helen has got a record of members who are here. Are there any conflicts of interest, either perceived or otherwise, that people wish to bring to our attention? I can't see any hands. If I miss anybody, say I appear to be across a number of different screens at the moment, so please shout. Now, in terms of agenda, there is a point. Hopefully, I don't forget. We tend to cover off the next meeting at the very end, but I do know that we have had previous discussions about how and when we can fit in training for committee members. We currently have the December meeting scheduled as an in-person meeting because we're required to approve the statement of accounts at that meeting. We have a meeting between now and then in September. So when we get to the end, or even as part of the effectiveness of committee discussion, let's try and pick up, if we can, how we best use that session for training, or whether we need an additional session to cover that off. Excellent. Right, minutes. Let me turn, if I can, to the minutes from the meeting in March. Now, again, please shout. I reread the minutes again last night and this morning. I can't find anything which is outstanding. There are no specific action points, I don't believe, which it's worth raising. There are a number of topics that we talked about last time that are effectively carried over to today's meeting, one of them being effectiveness of committee. But if anybody has anything which they wish to raise from the minutes in May, then please shout. Okay. Good. We'll take those as approved.
Graham, I've just got my hand up.
Yeah. Sorry. See, it's much more effective to shout.
No, it's very difficult, isn't it, when there's lots of people on the meeting.
Joanne.
Right. If I look at 5.14, Councillor Baker-Rogers stated that the description, cause and impact needs to be reworded to include best practice. The head of legal agreed to update the document to reflect the same. I'm just wondering if that's been done.
Hi, Joanne. Yes, that has been done, and we've just noted in the exact summary, if you notice, just under key changes, it's on page 6 of the index summary 1.358. It just tells you how we've updated we've included best practice, but we had a risk at functional level that links to the constitution, and that's now been, we don't have it at functional level. We've merged the two now, so they're included in that corporate risk.
Okay, right, thank you.
No.
Okay, thanks, Joanna. Thanks, Daniela, for picking that up. So I think if in terms of agenda, the other topic that I just wanted us to be mindful of, I'm sure we won't miss it. It gets picked up as part of committee effectiveness anyway, but I did just want to make sure that we spoke a little bit about fraud and fraud prevention and how that fits across both training and audit plan. So Alex, I'll mention that when we get to the internal audit plan specifically, but please remind me if I forget to do that. Excellent. So I think, Daniela, we are on to risk, which includes a deep dive of risk 310. I've done this before, but I just wanted to say thank you for providing the narrative at the front end of the risk register. I think the context is always particularly important, specifically in relation to the Great North Partnership and how TFN evolves to deliver alongside that organisation. All of these things are highly relevant to our consideration of risk. So over to you, Daniela.
Brilliant. Okay, so taking the corporate risk registers rep, just probably want to just give you a little bit of highlight in terms of the exec summary and what's been going on really since we last met in March. So you'll see from the exec summary that we've now got an approved business plan with corporate milestones, which included as part of the operating report, and we've submitted the spending review in April. And that has now, since the spending review announcement, we now subsequently need to prepare for TFN's medium-term future. Still gaining further clarity from government on some of the specific projects that we have. You'll also notice that some of the scoring and rewording of the risk have been updated since we last met in March, and there's a number of reasons for that. Some of it is to reflect what is better or within TFN's control, and how we're progressing with some of the actions and controls that are in place, but also based on especially specifically around the funding and on the spending review as well. That's some of the sort of key points that I want to bring out, as well as the risks that we discussed before around being updated since comments and considerations that we had from the deep dive last time. Guess, is there any questions on the corporate risk register or any of the changes that have been made to that?
I can't see any.
Joanna? Sorry, Graham. Sorry.
No, I was looking. Sorry. Go ahead, John, if you have a question.
Sorry. I think you just have to assume that I will have a question, Graham, and ask me to speak.
But... No, that's a reasonable assumption. I quite like that.
Right. This is my comment. If we look at the risk register, the current score and the target scores, in nearly all of them, they're exactly the same. And I'm just wondering, do we feel we've done everything we can to reduce every risk? Do we not think they can be reduced below the current target score, where they're the same as the current score? I just feel a little bit uncomfortable there.
So what we do, as every review we have, Joanna, we do discuss this, and our current risk environment takes into place where we are now with the existing controls that are in place. And then anything that's at target position is saying, do we have anything over and above that, mitigation action-wise that we haven't implemented yet that we can do any more on? And we do challenge that at every review we have. So what we're saying now is that currently, with all our existing controls in play, and that is where we are at currently at the moment. Is there anything over and above that in terms of implementation of mitigation actions that we haven't? But the focus is the current position. So there is no, in the eyes of the risk reviews, that challenge is there, and there is nothing further in terms of implementation of new mitigation actions that we can do. However, that's not to say that those will not come along at a point in time, maybe in 2 or 3 weeks' time. Certain actions might be brought in where we could turn around and say, actually, now we know more in this area and we could implement this particular action on there, and let's put against that against it and reduce the target score. That's why you'll primarily not see a change.
It just feels, from a risk management perspective, to have a target score which is in the high category. I wouldn't do a risk register like that. I would want everything to be as low as possible, as I'm sure you do. But I just find it a little bit odd to read a risk register where the target scores are mainly in the high category. And my other comment was, given cyber security issues that have been all over the press and continue to be all over the press, I'd be interested to know how that's come out as a 10, and that the target is a 10 as well. Thank you.
So with relation to cyber, it's something that we do quite a lot of sort of research on, monitoring on. We've done a deep dive on recently. We do the internal audits on as well. And based on the last deep dive that we had around that score of 10, the head of IT sort of came to Audit and Governance and gave that assurance as to why we scored it as a 10 as an organisation based on our operating model and our environment, and we were quite comfortable with the assurance of the score on that in terms of why it would be scored at a medium in terms of how TFN are set up operationally, in terms of what level of risk we have and the impact to us. We can always, if needed, Joanna, on that, if we need to provide more information, we can do with the head of IT. But I think I'm hoping that with the previous deep dive that we've had and the assurance mechanisms in place, it would be enough to provide a level of assurance based on our operating model. But we can always sort of provide further clarity if needed in specific areas where we wouldn't have that information.
Okay, thank you for that. It just makes me feel, having seen other cyber security attacks that have happened out of the blue, these big organisations with a lot of people working on this haven't seen it coming, and it's had devastating effects on the operation of that particular organisation. It just makes me feel a little bit wary, that's all.
No,
but thank you for the explanation.
Councillor, you mentioned it in, I think it was the December one, where it was quite a large organisation. I think the head of IT was with us, and he said the specifics of reasons why that sort of activity wouldn't be able to happen within TFN. So it's definitely considered, definitely reviewed and monitored, and we are sort of quite confident within that sort of scoring.
Okay.
In the environment, sort of all the controls that we've got has changed for us to think otherwise of that. However, just to reassure you that if there is any information that would help with specifics, we can provide you with that, and just to reassure you if needed.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Right, thanks, Joanna. Has anybody else? Richard, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just drop my hand. Yeah, thanks for the report. It's a really detailed risk report. I enjoyed reading it. My observation is a little along the same lines, really. I think just swapping between screens. It was just on page 23, and it's just an observation, really. In terms of the summary of 72 mitigating actions, 61 are ongoing actions. Only 3 of those are due by the end of August 2025, and only one action was closed in the last quarter. So I'm just wondering whether it would be kind of useful for the committee just to see, out of 72 mitigating actions, and I accept with these being quite high level risks that, some of these will take months, maybe even some would take years to complete. But just in terms of getting a scale of how long it's likely to be before 61 or 72, 61 ongoing actions, if only one's been closed in the last quarter, at that burn rate, it could take many quarters to get through 61. So just a kind of not an accurate, I don't need an accurate answer to this, but just, in terms of all those actions that are ongoing, which are, it's pleasing to see that they're there, but what's the likelihood, or what's the time scale on potentially closing more of these actions? That was the question, Chair.
Hi Richard. I think so what you'll notice and we've had this discussion before about how we do the controls or actions that are there and the ongoing environment. And we tested based on sort of some of the things that I've said a few times around can we put dates against them, and we tested this with I think Graham suggested a RAD status. So we looked into that over the last quarter, and we felt that the best thing to do was where, and we've done this in the exec summary, where we've got sort of, especially with the very high and high risk, where we've got controls or actions that are in place, we've really brought them out within the exec summary to try and give you the assurance of the things that are changing and that are going on within those areas. And again, because of the operating environment that we are in and we do face, a lot of those actions or controls are ongoing and they are long term. So where it might be in place, it's a control that's in place and it's a long term in place, it could be for a year or longer. It may be that we'll tweak the wording slightly based on sort of the changes in the environment that we have. But I can assure you that anything that we do sort of change, or if there's anything on hold, you should definitely see feed up to that exec summary level, where we have got a proportion that we do have a lot of ongoings, and it's just the reassurance that says, is this being monitored? Is this being looked at and challenged as part of the risk reviews? And it definitely is, and we try to sort of bring that out as much as we can within the exec summary. The deep dives hopefully help as well. But more so than that, if there is anything where you think, actually, well, that's not being fed through the exec summary or the deep dive, more than willing to provide explanations on any of that offline in more detail, via email or even at the next meeting if required, if that has helped. But it primarily is due to the way TFN operate and in the environment that we're in. You'd see a lot of long-term sort of actions or controls that are there.
That's helpful. Yeah, I mean, I suppose just to be fair to yourself and the organisation, that a lot of these are interdependent on other people. So I suppose, and it's easy to say, but very difficult to do. But out of those 61 or 72 actions, which ones are, can Transport for the North take ahead under its own steam without other people, without reliance on others? So it just on the face of it looks, if you've completed one action and there's 72 waiting in the wings, that it could be perceived that you're not working through the actions quickly. But I get that some of these are big issues and some of them are slow burners and 100% reliant on others to get the job done. So yeah, it was just an observation. Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that, Danielle.
Yeah, right. Good. Thank you both. Good. Good discussion. Anybody else? I don't think anybody else has hand up. So I think sorry, Katie, go ahead.
Thanks, Graham. Katie Day, Deputy Chief Executive at Transport for the North. I haven't been to the Audit Committee for a while. I'm here today because I'm here for the deep dive on risk. That was a really interesting conversation, and it's just got me thinking, Richard, Joanna, whether we actually need to look at the definition of what a completed action is. Because when I read the actions that we have under the rail risks that I've inherited since January, the actions are done and they are part of our BAU. So, for example, the engagement that we have around infrastructure planning, we've done the work, and it's now about keeping it up to date, keeping it current, and using it in our day-to-day work. So, but it's read as an ongoing action, but it isn't. It's BAU. So I'm just wanting to float that I think we potentially could just take a bit of a reflection internally as to how we've defined what is a completed action, because I think that it could be somewhat misleading if we keep having things as ongoing. So it was an offer if the committee would find that helpful, given Daniella's brilliance on risk management and risk registers, that perhaps we just have a little look at it through that lens, if that would be useful.
The other thing that obviously the link to it was an action, as Katie said, and it's now a control. So where we've got the control environment, we've put control on it, but what that will also determine is what the current score is and the target. So anything that is a control is obviously included as part of the current score, and anything that would be an action would be part of the target score. So that might help with that as well.
Grand, thank you. So I think the two takeaways, Daniela, for me are, I think starting that point that Katie was just picking up on, that Richard raised about what else can be done to improve our understanding of the information that's in that report. You know, I take Richard's point about, you know, particularly when you're reporting volume measures such as number of actions. I think, you know, again, context is everything. Without the context, it's difficult to appreciate what that actually means to the organisation. I think that's the test, because not all of those 61, if it was 61 or not, whatever the number is, they're not all of equal importance, are they? Some are more important than others. I get the point about elevating the significant ones to the narrative in the exec summary, but I think if there was some additional context you could put around those numbers, whether it's revised definitions or some additional metric, that would be helpful. And I think to Joanna's point, sorry, about cyber, I think there is a risk of complacency in respect of cyber. There has been a risk of complacency, and that risk is you know, sits behind big companies not being able to take online orders, etc. So it's, yeah, I think anything we can do to demonstrate that we feel a sense of chronic unease about cyber, I think that would be my suggestion. And I take Joanna's point that presenting cyber as a 10 doesn't really emphasize the chronic unease that we ought to have about that subject. It isn't necessarily about the impact that it would have on TfN's operations. For me, I think given the nature of the organisation, I think it's more about likelihood. You know, if you accept that cyber attacks are almost inevitable somewhere, you know, how does that translate into an overall 10? So I think those 2 points, Daniela, as takeaways. If you could give some thought to that.
With the cyber one, I'll have a conversation with the head of IT, and similarly, I think when he was at the committee meeting in December, he gave sort of some reassurance as to why it was scored at 10, and I could come back with that either sort of at the next committee meeting or sooner.
Yeah, grand. I know scoring is always a little bit arbitrary. Go ahead.
Right. What makes this risk unique, I think, is the fact we all know about cybersecurity, and we all know what the threat is, and we all know what the impact can be. For lots of other risks on the risk register, you'd have to have very specialised knowledge, wouldn't you? So I think it's really important that we take that factor into account when we come up with the risk rating. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanna. I'll have a chat with the head of IT, and we'll come back on that particular thing. And the key with it is a key thing around TFN operations and the control environment that we have got in place within IT and across TFN as a whole, which is why we do credit score, and we have justification for the probability and the impact and each of the impacts and why they're scored in that way. So if that would help, we have shared it previously at a deep dive, but I appreciate that, maybe not everyone was there for that last time when we did it. And we also have a cyber audit plan. I think we've moved it on, but I think it's due for at some point next year. So but we'll come back to you on that as well.
Excellent. Thank you. A good discussion on my second favourite topic. Excellent. Thank you,
Chair, you've got Chair, you've got
sorry.
A hand up from Martin.
Sorry, Martin. I do apologise.
It's okay, Chair. And we'll take those points away, as Daniela has said about the cyber, but just to reassure the committee, as I think a number of the contributions have highlighted, given the way that TFN operates and its reliance upon systems, I just want to reassure the committee it is something we take incredibly seriously. And indeed, we regularly test the ability, our defences against cyber attack. So in addition to understanding the nature of the risk, we do, we actively test the way in which we operate and test those defences. But let's take that point away, and as Daniela, as you said, if we can come back and just give some reassurance, because I agree with all the contributions from members. It is a really important part of the way we operate. If we were, unfortunately, the victims of an attack, it would have an implication for us. So I just, Chair, wanted to reassure the committee it is something we take incredibly seriously, and we do test those. It's not just about the risk, but it's about testing the defences we've got on a regular basis.
Thank you, Martin. Very useful context. Good discussion. So I think Daniela and Katie, we are on to deep dive for risk 310. Something jumped out at me when I read it, Katie, and that was the reference to voice of the customer. So we can hopefully pick that up as part of the discussion, because I don't think I see that all that often. Maybe we should see it more as a reference. Anyway, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm joined this morning by my colleague Chris Roberts from our Rail North Partnership team, and from Alex Woodall from our Strategic Rail team. So, Chair, I was going to sort of give just a very brief overview, and then hand to Chris to talk a little bit more about Rail North, and then Alex just to give you an overview of where we are, I think, nationally on rail reform, and specifically what the North has been saying, which definitely picks up your point about the voice of the customer, which I have to say is something as well that our Rail North Committee, particularly our Rail North Committee Chair, has made very clear in rail reform. This has got to be about the passenger and that customer experience. So this risk in particular, we've had a slight reword, as noted in the paper. So the risk is the North's role in the rail industry following rail reform could result in a suboptimal outcome in supporting sustainable and inclusive growth. The reason we've got this risk on there is because as the North of England, the constituted authorities that make up Transport for the North, we already have some level of devolution when it comes to rail. This is quite unique compared to other parts of the country. And that devolution comes in the form of the Rail North Partnership, which is a joint agreement between the DfT and the North of England, and the North of England being the constituted body that is TFN. So that is our political leaders. There's two aspects of that devolution. Chris is going to talk a little bit more about this in a moment, but in summary, we have an oversight and control role around the TOCs, the two TOCs primarily for the north of England, which are Northern Trains and Trans-Pennine Express. And secondly, we have a role in providing what's termed statutory advice to the Secretary of State in matters relating to pan-Northern rail infrastructure as well. So in carrying out those roles over many years in the north of England, you've had the important role in there of the Rail North Committee, which is a mature political partnership of all the authorities across the north of England, plus those other rail authorities that are covered by Northern Trains and Trans-Pennine. So that's why we have representation in there from Lincolnshire, Staffordshire, Stoke, for example, as well. And that resource, that political partnership, I'd say, with the resource that comes from the Rail North team that Chris is part of, have really helped the north of England get underneath the bonnet of some of those big pan-northern issues that we faced in the last, best part of 10 years. That's included not only responding to a pandemic and what you might do about rail services in that situation, but what do you do in the face of a timetable collapse as we had in May 2018. And it was the work of the north of England with our political leaders, with the teams that we got here with the department and partners that helped unlock some of those issues. And more recently, that's also supported the renationalisation with Trans-Pennine Trains a couple of years ago. Putting in evidence under our statutory role about ticket office closures and preventing those. And of course, if you've been monitoring our Rail North Committee work more recently, trying to get a resolution to Sunday timetables and arrangements on Sundays for Northern Trains. And with our infrastructure hat on, we've been able to create what we've called the state of play, which for the first time has given the north of England a plan that goes right across the Pennines, that looks at what the infrastructure is and when it's expected to be delivered, and how that maps against our aspirations and ambitions in the Strategic Transport Plan. And that's a very live piece of work that is guiding the committee in terms of their work, their decisions and their thinking about infrastructure investment. If I draw a line underneath that, though, what we've now got happening, of course, is national rail reform, and you'll be aware of the legislation that's working its way through Parliament, and that will give our mayors a direct relationship with Great British Railways, a statutory role there as well. I think it's fair to say, though, and the Rail North Committee picked this up at their meeting in June, what the North wants to think about as a collective is where it would still wish to work together on pan-Northern matters, because one thing for sure in the north of England, if you start doing something in Manchester, you're probably going to have a knock-on impact in Leeds. Or if you start doing something in Leeds, it'll affect the East Coast Main Line. So it is a network, and I think it's fair to say political leaders have acknowledged, even in their own bilateral relationships, such as the White Rose Partnership in Yorkshire or the Liverpool-Manchester Rail Board, that there's a need to work together because it is a network that crosses boundaries. And passengers think about how they're going to get from A to B. They don't necessarily think about what boundaries they're going to cross to do it. So we agreed with Rail North Committee in June that we would, as their executive team here in TFN, working with Rail North colleagues as well, start to map what the North's ambitions may look like for rail reform, how some of those would potentially knit together. That's work that's happening now. We're talking with the MCAs and the local transport authorities to shape that, and we hope to bring some early advice back to Rail North in September. That's ongoing, and what we've done in the meantime is we have responded to the Rail Reform National Consultation, which Alex will speak about in a moment. But what we thought would be very helpful today would be to give you a little bit more of an overview of the existing devolution, the powers, the functions, the opportunities that we've already got here in the north of England because of that existing level of devolution. So with that note, I will hand to Chris. I should have said, sorry, Chair, at the start, we know everyone's had the slides in their pack. We thought it was more helpful to see faces this morning and talk it through, hence we're not sharing them. So I will just come to Chris, though, now just to talk through Rail North Partnership, and then Alex will give us a brief overview of what we've got to in terms of our rail reform consultation response. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As Katie said, I'm Chris Roberts. I'm Head of Programmes in the Rail North Partnership. In the senior executive team of the partnership, and I have specific responsibility for the Trans-Pennine Express side of the business. So a brief potted history, if you like, of the Rail North Partnership. So it was first established back in March 2015. So we've been going about 10 years now, following signing of an agreement between then Rail North Limited, which later assimilated into TfN when it was stood up, and also with the Secretary of State. And this, as Kelly said, was quite unusual, and it was the first step in devolving rail responsibilities to the north of England. These partner responsibilities are set out in the agreement, and they are overseen by a board, Rail North Partnership Board, comprising 3 senior representatives from Transport for the North and its member authorities, and 3 representatives from the Department for Transport. And obviously behind that board, as Katie described, there is the full governance and constitution of TfN, including Rail North Committee, and on the DFT side, its own governance as well. And the main responsibilities of the board can be summarised into 2 main areas. Again, as Katie briefly discussed there, that's the joint managing of the Northern and Trans-Pennine Express rail service contracts, and overseeing cooperation between the parties regarding TfN's role as a statutory partner to the Secretary of State in respect of rail infrastructure investment planning. A bit more detail for the first of those. That would include things like oversight and management of the Rail North Partnership Management Team, for which I am part, operator performance, service delivery and specification, including service timetables, and more general operator output, things like stations, the services they provide at stations, that sort of thing. Fares and ticketing, rolling stock number, type and deployment, and the specification of rolling stock. And we are heavily involved in also the procurement of rolling stock to deliver future services. Operator budgets, service contract development. So I, for example, work very closely with the Department for Transport in developing the new and up-to-date service contracts, which will apply to all operators as they move into public ownership, and these contracts will take us into the full standing up of GBR. So I'm involved in the design and policy approach to these new contracts, and the board also oversees supervision of rail business units where they have allocated responsibility to service contract matters. I think there are currently 2 business units. There's one in the northwest and one in the northeast. The current partnership agreement does allow responsibilities currently being undertaken by the Rail North Partnership to be devolved to these business units, so that there is ability within the current agreement for further devolved responsibility into the regions. TfN also has some additional powers under the agreement, which include the ability to propose service output changes, which may be put forward and funded by the TfN or its member authorities. In certain circumstances, it can also generate funds from increases to fares to enable delivery of schemes that benefit passengers. And it also has the ability annually to put forward further devolution proposals. The management team itself comprises a blend of both TfN and DFT employed staff. So we're all working collaboratively together in the same office, so to speak, to manage the rail service operator contracts and to deliver the partnership function. And the team is also fully embedded into both partner organisations. So its officials often provide direct advice, for example, to both ministers and to TfN and member authorities. And it has a crucial role to play in leading on other matters, such as influencing major infrastructure delivery to ensure better outcomes for passengers during disruption, stakeholder engagement, procurement, decision and policy making. So that's a brief overview of what we do. There's an awful lot more that we do. I have to say that's a brief potted summary. But we are very much involved in the day-to-day operation and business of delivering services in the north. We have regular, almost daily contact with the managing directors of both operators, and with at senior level within DFT and TFN, and the northern leaders. So happy to take any questions at the appropriate time.
Thanks, Chris. I'll come to Alex.
Thanks, Katie. Hi everyone. My name is Alex Woodall. I'm Rail Reform Advisor for Transport for the North. So just to provide a bit of background on the rail reform consultation, which was set out at a national level, I think back in February this year by the Department for Transport. This is the backdrop to the rail reform bill that will be going through later this year, and it's designed to set out the legislative basis for Great British Railways, which is going to integrate track and train, which are currently separated, dating back for about 30 years, essentially. It does a number of things. The proposed consultation document, it proposes a new statutory role for male strategic authorities. It proposes reform of railway access rights, so essentially how we divvy up capacity on the railway network. It also proposes a new passenger watchdog and reform of the railway regulator and how regulation works. We put together a high-level response, which is proposed to be which is a kind of a collective response on behalf of our partners, who have also responded to this on an individual basis in many cases. It's been designed to highlight the successes of devolution today and the challenges, and we've put together 6 key recommendations on the back of the consultation response. So first is empowering local partnerships and enabling integration. So that's all about enabling local partners to bring in the railway into their wider public transport networks in a way that hasn't been able to be done in the past. So it's seeing rail as part of the wider public transport network, so there's more seamless integration with bus, tram, what have you, in whatever local area that there is. The second recommendation is building on our foundations, and that's kind of building on what both Chris and Katie have covered in that we have a successful devolution settlement to date that's given us a number of powers and levers for our partners to use in respect of the railway, and what we're not looking for with rail reform is to lose those things, and we want to build on that, despite the fact it will take a slightly different form under the new relationship with male strategic authorities. The third recommendation is to improve accessibility across the north, so that's been a key priority at the Rail North Committee, and I think we're at a position where the evidence is really strong that accessibility has a long way to go in the north, particularly across stations, and what we want to see prioritised under the newly reformed railway is that accessibility is at the forefront. We also want our fourth priority is for the new Great British Railways to have a much greater focus on transparency and data. Many of our partners in the past have struggled to get the appropriate levels of data from the rail industry due to contractual issues, lots of fragmentation across the industry. It's been quite tough, especially outside of the Rail North Partnership arrangements. So obviously we have a very good relationship with Northern and TransPennine, but beyond that, looking at other operators, it's been particularly difficult, and we want that to be simplified. Our fifth recommendation was enabling greater financial flexibility. So in essence, part of that's about greater financial devolution to our partners, being able to decide what's best for them in terms of directing certain funds. That might be access for all, which I've touched on with accessibility, but deciding where, in what order, and how to prioritise where they want the funding to go. But also, I think looking further into the future, we want there to be greater financial flexibility with how railway funding functions in relation to wider public transport funding, and there to be greater flexibility for how our partners could shift money between bus and the railway and trams and so on. And finally, and this is a really important aspect, what we really want the railway to do is prioritise growth, and that all kind of links back to our STP, Strategic Transport Plan, which envisages growth, unlocks growth for the wider north, and what we don't want the railway to become is a kind of cost management exercise. We want it to be orientated around unlocking economic growth and opportunities, and not just focusing on cost, essentially. So, yeah, those are our 6 recommendations, and yeah, happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. So, Chair, I think over to the committee.
Well, I was about to assume that Joanna would have a question, but you beat me to it, Joanna, by putting your hand up.
I just thought I should put my hand up because that's the way we do things properly, isn't it? But thank you very much.
All right.
Right. I thought that was a very interesting presentation, so thank you. I've just got a few reflections on the key recommendations. Right, you want to transform accessibility, and you put in the report that the customer is at the heart of our response, as it should be. But isn't it more than your current customers? Isn't it your potential customers as well? Those that at the minute don't have the confidence to use train travel, think it will be too difficult, think there's too many barriers in place. So don't we also want to be talking to people that don't use trains but would really like to do so? You know, I just feel that voice is incredibly important, as you've said, but I think it needs to be wider than the current customer base. Thank you.
Councillor, the simple answer is absolutely. So in reflecting what we've put in the response and noting it's a response for the whole of the north of England, so it is deliberately very strategic and high level because a lot of the detail is being worked through. But where we want to get to, notwithstanding that the north of England has more subsidy into its railway than any other part of the country, we want to reduce subsidy and we want to grow revenue. And that has to mean growing the passenger base. And actually the data that we've seen and that the industry's worked on suggests there is market headroom there. There is the opportunity to grow. But to do that, we've also alongside got to make the railway more accessible. And so when we went out as part of the work that we did around accessibility at railway stations on behalf of the Rail North Committee, we actually used our Northern Transport Voices panels. This is nearly 2,000 people right across the north of England. Some use the railway, some don't, but we went and got lived experiences and primary data from them about what it would take them to get onto the railway. A big chunk of it is accessibility. Can they physically, they've got any sort of mental or disabilities as well in terms of accessibility onto the railway, but also thinking about fares, thinking about reliability, thinking about frequency. What would be the factors that need to be considered to draw more people into using the railway? And again, as Alex mentioned in our strategic transport plan, it's why We've got a metric in there about trying to create that mode shift to more sustainable modes. And also when we think about, while we think about passengers here, just in the sense of people, but also thinking about freight onto the rail as well. You know, I think there is some frightening statistic, which is probably only around 3 to 5% of the UK population actually use the railway themselves, but 100% of us rely on the goods that get transported around our railway. So we're thinking about it from every angle. So in short, in answer to your question, yes, it's the people that would use the railway as much as those that are using it now. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for that reply. I'm very pleased to hear it. Just to mention that one of the barriers, and you didn't mention it, so I'm just going to mention it now, is having the confidence that the support you book is going to be there for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's a major barrier to a lot of people with disabilities. Yes, okay, I've got the timetable, I can afford the ticket, but you know, you do hear about people being stuck on trains for hours that cannot get off because the assistance that they booked has not appeared.
It's frightening, some of the stories you hear, Councillor, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And
people dragging themselves off trains.
I some very famous ones as well.
Yes, Tanny Gray Thompson.
She did, and it's why I mean, Chris will have the details, but that has been a specific aspect we've looked at with Northern Trains in terms of their passenger assistance services as well. Is something that's subject to regulation through the ORR. So if you would like a little bit more detail about what's in place with our current TOCs, we'd happily provide that offline to you if that would be useful.
Yeah, I'd be very interested. Thank you.
Chris, I'll leave that one with you if we can, just a short note offline just about where we are with accessibility for Northern and TransPennine, because you're absolutely right. It's confidence that someone's going to be there to help you. And I know that that's front and centre, and it's why our RNC chair always takes the accessibility item first at our meetings, because it's so paramount in terms of supporting all passengers. Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks, Joanna. Claire, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I'd be keen to have the same that you're going to pass to Joanna too, if I could have some information on the accessibility. In Mersey Travel, we're actually working on getting all our stations accessible, and that should happen next year, 2026. So it would be good to sort of make sure that the Northern Line sort of is on par with us type thing. One of the questions I wanted to ask, though, as someone who travels to Manchester and the lakes quite a lot, are we going to consider timing to get more passengers on the trains? So, for example, if I go to a show in Manchester or a gig in Manchester, the last train back to Liverpool is 10:30, 11 o'clock. So I have to leave early or find somewhere to stay. Now, that is going to sort of knock the economy of the area of Manchester slightly, because people can't afford to stay over, or, you know, they've got to organise taxis, etc. So I think the cultural side of, you know, we've got that little theatre by the lake. I think that's up in Kendal. There's all kinds of amazing things that we can go and see and bring people in, but the transport isn't there. Now, if you lived in London, you could go into London, go and watch a show, and there's trains every like 5 seconds. So we're looking at getting something like that here.
Yeah. Councillor, I'd encourage you to have a listen back to our last Rail North committee, actually, or have a watch, because it's front and centre of our political leaders' minds for sure. Since COVID, the recovery of the leisure market, the rail leisure market in the north of England has been quite something. I haven't got the data to hand, but I know from a fact when I stand on my local train station on a Friday night, it is quite frightening the number of people using the Anglo-Saxon route to travel. And exactly that, how do we make those leisure markets into the evenings in our cities and towns much more accessible? So I think the short answer is yes, it's absolutely on the table for consideration. But I also think this is where greater devolution to our mayors is a real opportunity. We're seeing what, you know, Mayor Rotherham's doing with Merseyrail, particularly on the accessibility side. But actually, using the example of Manchester, seeing what Mayor Burnham's doing with the B network integration of rail, And a lot of the emphasis behind that is the ability to put more services in and integrate that into the Metrolink, into the buses. So guess what? If you are at the Co-op Live or you've been this weekend, gone to Heaton Park to the Oasis, you can get home. So I think the short answer is there's a huge economic opportunity there. There's a huge accessibility opportunity there. And it's front and centre, I know, of our mayor and political leaders' minds to make a difference. Ultimately, it will come down to what's possible and the funding for it as well. But going back to where I started, which was we want to reduce subsidy and grow revenue. And if you can do that, then I'm not saying we're about to have a London-style transport system, but you know what, the ambition to have that availability, that turn up and go on a timeline that goes beyond 10:30 at night would be amazing. So thanks for raising the point, really well made.
Grand. Thank you, Claire. Any other comments? No, okay. So I mentioned voice of the customer because it's increasingly important. I think it doesn't really matter which industry you're in. All regulators are following a very similar playbook, and you only have to look at how social housing regulation has changed since Grenfell to understand how voice of the customer is now central to what the regulator is looking for landlords to deliver. And I'm sure that's the same direction that the rail regulator will head into. So I guess my cautionary comment was simply around ensuring that we can actually evidence that the customer is central to our response, not just to say it. I'm not trying to be flippant or provocative, Katie, unnecessarily. And I know you mentioned the customer groups that you've used to do that. But I think it is important to explain what we mean with statements like that. The other comment that I would make, and this is something I think that many of us have seen over the last 2 or 3 years, is that perhaps carbon reduction, sustainability would have been front and centre more frequently 2 or 3 years ago. I get the sense across a number of different sectors, organisations, governments, that it's losing its appeal. So I was a little surprised to see prioritise growth and not prioritise a more sustainable transport solution. I guess was my. I don't share that comment as a member of the committee. I share it as a just a member of society, I suppose, just as a customer comment.
So, Chair, just a couple of reflections back. Evidence is key. We need to walk the talk. From a TfN perspective, I already mentioned our Northern Transport Voices panel. And the one thing that I think that I would point to at that panel is its lived experience. These are people from communities right the way across our region actually telling us what it's like. And that's evidence that we collate, we analyse, and is then directly informing our work, whether it's closing ticket office, proposals to close ticket offices, or actually what's needed in terms of accessibility at rail stations. And I think the value add of that is that it's telling us, certainly in the accessibility work, where we started looking at actually step-free access, could you get onto the platforms, it opened up a whole raft of work around, actually, do you even feel safe to get on a train platform? You know, we started talking about CCTV and safety. So I think first and foremost that diversity of perspective and putting people front and centre is something I'm very proud of to work at TfN for, because we've done an awful lot of work around transport-related social exclusion and actually shining a light on the fact that if you don't put people front and centre of transport systems, then you're probably not going to make them very inclusive. And if we really do want to actually open up sustainable economic growth, then we need to bring more people into the, you know, and to make opportunities more available to people. I will also add, though, that within the industry, and Chris Jackson, who is the Managing Director of TransPennine Trains, mentioned this at the last Rail North Committee, that the industry itself is directly engaging in a much more diverse way with their own panels, their own communities, and a huge wealth of evidence. For example, in thinking about the procurement of new rolling stock. Actually what makes sense, you know, if you are a disabled passenger or you need additional assistance. So that's a lot of work that we're seeing happen directly by Northern Trains and directly with TransPennine Express as well. I think your point about growth, I always go back to the strategic transport plan, as Alex mentioned, because our strategic transport plan, which is the North plan, is, yes, it's about growth, but it's about doing it sustainably and inclusively. It's not growth for growth's sake. And this is the whole point about trying to invest and improve our public transport offer. So actually, it is a choice that people can make, because as Councillor Baker-Rogers said, so they can rely on passenger assist. So do you know what? When you can rely on it, you're more likely to probably turn up and use a train, because the train's going to turn up and you're going to get help. So I think while we've talked about prioritising growth, it is about sustainable and inclusive growth, and it's therefore about having a sustainable and inclusive public transport system, so it is a valid choice that people might want to make. So I do apologise if the phrasing there perhaps suggests that we were looking at that exclusively, but that's definitely not where we come from our STP perspective. So I hope that provides a little bit of assurance.
Yeah, you know, you don't have to apologise, but thank you. Yeah, yeah, I think how we position things, how we phrase things is pretty important. If we want to do everything we possibly can to force us to change how we live, we have to keep saying sustainable growth. We don't just need to say growth. Would be my challenge back. I think it's an important element, and you know, we can't afford to drop it, I don't think, in terms of how we voice things, how we share things.
Can I just mention one thing, Graham?
Of course.
Thank you, Graham. Right, I thought that it's great you've got the forums and you're consulting with people more, but at forums you get a certain type of person that is empowered enough to come and join your forum, that wants their voice to be heard. There's going to be a lot of people out there whose opinions are equally as valid, but are not the type of person that are ever going to join a forum. So we can't just rely on creating forums to understand what accessibility needs are. I think it's very important to have multiple ways of how you engage with people, particularly in harder to reach communities, in hearing their voice. I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Really well made point, Councillor. I couldn't agree more. People want to engage in different ways, so it's about how we do that. And certainly from our perspective, our Northern Transport Voices utilises a number of different channels to reach people, you know, because some people don't want to come out into a forum or a public environment, but we'll take that back and keep that front and centre of how we work, because it's got to be a mixed approach, because everyone's got different needs. So thanks for that reminder, appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's good challenge, Joanna. Yeah, the challenge for TFN's board is, how does it ensure that it truly hears the voice of the customer? And you know, you look around the table at the board. You know, is that always coming through? I'm not just talking about TFN. I'm talking any board, any committee. So yeah, very important. Grand, thank you. All that was very useful. I've said this a number of times. I don't mind saying it again. I think that strategic context for how TFN works, what TFN is focused on, is essential to how this committee works. So thank you for that. I know some of the deep dives that we've had have been a little bit more operational perhaps in nature. I'm thinking about electric vehicle charging perhaps, although you could argue that's a strategic topic. But yeah, I thought that was a really good subject, and well worth well worth the time we've invested in it. So thank you to Alex and Chris as well.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, pleasure. So I think, Alex, we are on to internal audit update, if everybody's happy to continue.
Thank you, Chair. So there are 3 papers from RSM today. Just in terms of introductions, because I'm mindful, obviously, some new faces. I'm Alex Home, a director within RSM providing the internal audit service. So the first paper you have today is our progress report. So this very much sets out the timetable in terms of the audit plan for this year, where we are in terms of delivery and proposed dates moving forward. You'll see that we've finalised one report, and I'll just talk through that in a little bit more detail as we come to that one, which is the follow-up review. We had one report issued in draft, which is around the development of your information governance framework. That will be presented to the next meeting. However, I can confirm that that has been finalised this morning. And we are starting our contract management audit in August as well. Just to draw your attention to a point that was raised earlier on in the meeting, which was around the programme and audits that are included in the audit programme. At the last meeting, a verbal update was provided in regards to a change to the audit programme, with the cyber review taking place in roughly April 26, with the fraud review coming forward and taking place, and the date's been confirmed for October for that to commence and take forward, and a draft scope has been circulated in regards to that particular piece. But I'll just pause at that stage because I'm mindful, Chair, that you had a comment around fraud before I move on to the next papers. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes. So fraud is explicitly mentioned as part of the committee's brief. And I think one of my observations over the last few years is that there's been a significant emphasis on detection of fraud cases, the number of cases of fraud, and perhaps not quite so much emphasis on the sort of proactive, preventative side of things. So Joanne did send me through a note which I think contained a summary of the proposed audit scope for fraud. And the one comment that I would share, I guess, a request, is the more mature organizations are focused increasingly on high-risk roles, and they're increasingly focused on identifying and managing potentially fraudulent behavior, again as part of this greater emphasis on prevention. And I would, if the audit means to look at the anti-fraud or the fraud prevention strategy, I would just ask that we at least seek to understand what the organisation is doing in that space, and maybe looking across similar organisations to understand what else it could do in that space. So perhaps a little bit of RSM consultancy or free advice might come out of that in terms of what you've seen elsewhere that might translate well into something of TFN's size and scale, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, more than happy to take on board those comments. And one of the key components of the audit is around a fraud risk assessment, understanding where the key potential areas of risk, where the potential areas of fraud risk are. So that's, I guess, a starting point. And then obviously there'll be a review of the policies surrounding, obviously, fraud as well. Pause, I'm mindful of seeing a hand go up.
Yes, Daniela. Hi, Daniela.
Hi, everyone. I think what will help as well is when RSM do the review, they'll look at the risks that are identified across TFN in the functional areas such as HR, IT, procurement, and they'll look at the controls that are also set against those risks at the moment to see how sort of TFN are sort of managing forward within the risk environment that we have, but also around some of the controls that we have within, take finance as an example, segregation of duties, payroll, procurement, things like that. Really. So I think hopefully once RSM went to the review, there'll be sort of further clarity for audit to see some of those sort of key controls that are in place around the proactiveness of managing fraud prevention.
Brand, thank you. Is everybody else okay for us to?
May I just add something?
Of course.
I'd be very interested to know what the organisation is doing in terms of explaining to everyone what fraud is. Because there's lots of different types of fraud, and it may be obvious to some of us what it is, but to a lot of people out there, they just may not understand what would be classed as fraud. So I think it's really important that we also look at the education and the awareness around this and what we're doing to help our employees.
I think you've just gone on to mute, Joanna.
Sorry. I didn't even touch my computer. So I was just saying, I think it's really important that we get an understanding of how we're ensuring that employees understand what fraud is, what fraud looks like, what it means to them. Because I think that plays a very important part in actually reducing the risk of fraud in the organisation. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah, and I know that at least some of that is included in the draft scope that I've seen. Just to give you some assurance, John, I've seen. Gavin, hello.
Hello. I don't want to step on my own toes because this is going to be part of the self-assessment, but just for the benefit to the chair and to Councillor Baker Rogers, yeah, we do have the anti-fraud policy. We have training on this. I will cover this within the report, but just to respond to the point and so that you can think about it when I am going through the report. We do have measures in place. We have training in place for our colleagues. In terms of the specific point for Councillor Baker Rogers on how we inform staff of what fraud is, as you say, it can be different things that they might not be aware of. We do have some examples. We do set out some clear examples. One of those being, for example, payroll and the falsification of records, and that's even just we have timesheets at TFN which all employees have to fill in each day to note number of hours worked in that day. So again, even things like that are flagged as potential fraud within the organisation. I'll keep it brief because I know Chair, you'll want to move on to the next one, but I just wanted to mention that before we get into the self-assessment report that we'll discuss later. Thank you.
Grand. Thanks, Gavin. Right, Alex, back to you.
Thank you very much. So the second paper is I guess the position statement looking back on your 24-25. So this is just the annual summary reflecting the work that we did in the prior year, just bringing everything together so that you have it in one central place in terms of the coverage. But I'll take the paper as read in terms of the detail. Thank you.
Okay. I think we're okay to carry on, Alex.
Okay, thank you.
You've got Stuart wanting to come in, Chair.
Sorry. Thank you, Martin. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Hi,
thank you,
Stuart.
Chair.
Sorry.
Not at all. Thank you, Graham. And thank you, Alex, for speaking to this one. The position statement, as you say, is well, as someone on the outside looking in, it looks hugely positive. It's a credit to the efforts of the management and their respective teams. My question is in respect of how confident are we that we're targeting very scarce and very valuable resource, our internal audit resource, how confident are we that we're targeting it at the right areas? So to receive substantial assurance is hugely positive, of course, but my concern, such as it is that are we asking our auditors to look at areas perhaps where we know we've got issues that need to be addressed? And if we're not doing that, shouldn't we make that effort?
Thank you very much for your question, Stuart. So I think if take it back a little bit in terms of the journey when obviously TFN was established, what we did in the first stages is to look at some of the foundations. So what I'd call some of those core systems, particularly the finance systems, the governance and risk. And obviously some of those areas will form a basis of a cyclical review within the strategy. And the plan has started to develop, particularly in some of, I guess, those key areas. So we had obviously some of the sponsorship models, the frameworks and the offering, really as new reviews, particularly reflecting the journey of the organisation. And Paul Kelly, obviously, who's not on this call today. I know, Daniela, you were involved in and some of the shaping and obviously a chair of this committee in terms of sort of the direction of the audits and looking at the risks, but also a balance of your wider assurances as well. Recognise, obviously, discussions we've had on risk a little bit earlier. And we've also discussed at the committee as well, making sure that committee members have engagement in terms of developing the audit plan, recognising wider assurances, whether there's any assurance needs that are come through during the year. So obviously having that flexibility as well. So it's a good question in terms of the areas. Obviously we've got some with as I said, reasonable assurance, substantial assurance. Prior years we have had different opinions, some higher categorised actions as part of those reviews. Sometimes it's a timing of when we do those reviews, depending obviously on a particular project or change that's taking place. The information governance framework is a relatively I guess a good example this year, where it's a new framework looking at how that's been embedded and implemented within the organisation, rather than looking at it at a later stage. We're looking at it at an early stage. So some of it's around that timing as well. I hope that answers your question just in terms of the balance and I guess the contribution in terms of developing the audit plan.
It does indeed. Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, no, it is a good challenge, Stuart. I don't feel the need to defend the plan per se, but one of the things that I said to the board in the past is that the relationship that TFN has with its internal auditors and the relationship that this committee has with its internal auditors, I think is really important, because Alex and others attend every committee meeting, and I think that's part of getting a real sense of the organisation and where the risks are. And I think that helps the dialogue that they then have with management in respect of where to position that audit resource. So I think from a process point of view, I think it looks quite healthy. But yeah, it's right that we challenge the sequencing and the content of the plan based on our understanding of risk. And I think the way that the fraud and cyber assignments have moved are probably evidence of that. Sort of dynamic plan, which is usually a healthy thing rather than a static. But yeah, thank you, Stuart. Alex, back to you, I think.
Thank you very much. So we have the first report of 25-26. So this is a follow-up review of the prior year's actions. And what you'll see in terms of this particular review, that 8 out of 15 actions have been implemented. We've noted reasonable progress in regards to a number of the actions, and we've provided context around a number of actions where I think it's fair to say progress has been made, but some of the actions are certainly outside of the control of TFN in terms of next steps. So you'll see there are 5 actions that are ongoing, 1 that's not implemented. Predominantly the actions that are ongoing in regards to the Northern Powerhouse Rail sponsorship model arrangements and some of the next steps in terms of the agreement. So you'll see in the narrative that progress has been made. It's then obviously some of the negotiations that have to take place. And we understood this as, when we undertook this review, it was to help to shape some of those discussions going forward, recognising the relationship and communication and governance needed to move forward and progress. But obviously it needs some careful balancing in terms of the next steps of those actions. So I think that, the overall reasonable progress is a fair reflection in terms of those actions. But other actions, as I said, we've confirmed as implemented based on sample testing. I'm poised happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Grand. Thanks, Alex. I think we're okay. No, Richard, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. It is a minor point, Alex. Just looking at, if I just get my agenda back up, page 74, which is what I did when I read the papers. Obviously, I tracked last year's follow-up and this year's. There was 2 from last year which have been picked up and cleared this year. Overall, really healthy with regards to the organisation's performance, I suppose, in terms of picking up and implementing audit recommendations. It's often, I see that as a key committee responsibility to ensure that as well as the audit's been done and completion of the audit plan, that management picks up and implements recommendations. This one's to do with project management, and it's the one that's listed as superseded. So just in case you've not got the papers, it was management will consider updating project management framework to take into account the following areas of good practice. There were 3 listed. It's just to highlight to the committee that, I can see with it being a low level recommendation, that's why probably it was worded as management will consider, because I tend, as an auditor, to avoid making recommendations which say management to consider, because management could just say, yeah, we considered it and we're not doing it. But just if the committee's happy with the comments as to why that best practice hasn't been taken forward. That was just the single point. Nothing. It's not a major one. Just to highlight that.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, I think the I think the comments applicable more generally, of course, in terms of how we word not so much the recommendations, but the management actions, certainly. Yeah, I would agree with you 100% that the control weakness that you identified in the audit could still be there, but management could have done everything they said they were going to do, and it's kind of a pointless exercise in that sense. But Alex, back to you.
Thank you. No, that's a fair point. And as Richard is an auditor, yeah, if it had been a medium action and we felt there was a control gap, then we'd certainly looking to report this differently in this report. It was more from the framework we did benchmarking, and these were more around enhancements. There was nothing of significance in terms of gap from that particular area. But yeah, it's a fair point in terms of making sure committee are comfortable if actions are superseded. Thank you.
Joanna, hi, go ahead.
Hi, yeah. Thank you for raising that point. Yeah, it doesn't. In the RSM comment, it says it has been decided not to incorporate the suggested areas of good practice into the framework, but it doesn't say why. Do you not think there should be a sentence in there which says because and explains why that decision was taken? Thanks.
Thank you. So you'll see the second comment was normally we'd look to see if a decision had been made and we'd said consider X, Y and Z, we'd look to see if something was documented in a governance paper or a meeting to say these are the reasons why we've made a decision not to take it forward. It might be something that's considered in the future. We weren't provided with that particular document or a reasoning to support it, which is why obviously we've made that reference just to make sure that committee are aware that obviously we weren't provided with that reasoning as part of that. So really just to draw committee's attention to.
That's a good challenge, Joanna. Thank you.
It's just a bit odd, isn't it, not to have the reason included in there or not to know the reason, because what's wrong with complying with best practice?
Yes, maybe we should be a little bit more on it. I think in terms of how we report that. Can I just I know you want to come back down here. Part of my role is to manage meeting timing, and I'm not sure I'm doing awfully well today because it's already 12:30. Are you okay, Daniela, if we scoot along?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay.
I'm actually going to have to drop off the call now in cater too, so if there is any questions related to risk, I'm happy to pick that up after.
Okay, grand. Thanks, Daniela.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Alex. Are you okay with that?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you for the questions.
Brilliant. Thank you. So, yeah, just back to my timing point. I haven't seen Daniel on the call. External audit. Who's picking Daniel's piece up?
I'll be myself, Chair.
Ian, sorry, Ian. Hi. I hadn't seen you. I knew I hadn't seen Daniel. Yes. So let's without diminishing the significance of external audit, let's assume that everybody's read the paper at least. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And just again, a quick introduction for me in the spirit of today. So I'm Ian Gilroy. I'm an audit manager with Forvis Mazars, who are your external auditors. And as you've rightly pointed out, we'd usually have Daniel Watson with us. He's the audit partner, but unfortunately, he's got a meeting clash today. So I've got the opportunity of presenting this to you today. And what I'm presenting is our audit strategy memorandum, our audit plan in its draft form. Hopefully nothing in here comes as a surprise. The format of the report hasn't changed substantially from prior years. So yeah, I'll take the report as read. I'll draw out some key points that I'd just like to highlight to you. So, I mean, as I say, the report's draft with Paul, the previous finance director, and Section 151 officer moving on. And I've got Keith joining you. We wanted to make sure we finalised the plan with Lisa and Keith, but didn't want to hold up presenting even a draft version of this to you. So we'll finalise that in the period between now and the next meeting and send it over as soon as it's ready. So into the draft report then. Page 91 of the pack, which is 11 in our report. Got a brief timeline on what we're doing and when. So our fieldwork will be commencing shortly. We were looking to get it started around July, but with some staff leaving our time, we needed to reach the plan. But we know this works better with the finance team too. Our aim is to complete in September, and we'll work with Keith, Lisa, and the finance team to do that. Moving on to page 94 of the pack, which is 14 in our report. We've got our materiality figures there. So due to the straightforward nature of the accounts and the quality of the accounts in the previous years, we're keeping materiality at the higher end of the scale. But now we've got the draft accounts for 24-25. We can see expenditures increase, which is important because that's how we determine our level of materiality, gross revenue expenditure. So we've updated our materiality figures to what we've got in the draft plan here. So it's looking to be now 322,000 for overall materiality, 257,000 for performance materiality, and 9,600 for our clearly trivial threshold. We're going to keep specific materiality around senior officer remuneration at 5,000, and we set that and keep it at that level just because of the sensitivity of the senior officer pay disclosures. Next, significant risks. As always, we've got two significant risks on the audit. The first is around fraud in management overrider controls. To be clear, that's not saying we've identified a specific issue at TFN. It's a mandated significant risk on all audits under auditing standards because of the way management are in a position to adjust the accounts. So we design procedures to address that risk. And finally, around the valuation of the defined benefit pension asset. So last year it was reported as a liability. This year it's reported as an asset, which illustrates perfectly why we set that as significant risk. Valuation's made up of, estimates, assumptions, which can clearly alter the value drastically. Management engaged their actuary to provide those valuations, and we carry out our own work on that as well. One more point on the financial statements audit is around the implementation of the new leases standard, IFRS 16. So that's about removing the distinction of an operating and a finance lease from a lessee perspective and bringing these leasing arrangements onto the balance sheet. Implementation of a new standard is always a risk, so we've said it's an enhanced risk for now, but we may change our risk assessment as the audit goes on. So that's everything from the financial statements audit. One last point around VFM in the interest of time. We carry out our work in terms of TFN's arrangements for delivering value for money, and specifically the arrangements across financial sustainability, governance, and improving economy efficiency and effectiveness. Last year, we didn't identify any weaknesses in arrangements. In our work so far, we've not identified any risks of significant weaknesses in arrangements. But should we identify any, we'll speak to management about that and we'll report those to you as soon as we can. That's all I'm looking to present today. Happy to take any questions, but if there's not any, I'll hand that to you, Chair.
Ian, excellent, thank you. Now I know that Keith has now arrived. He actually arrived some time ago. It makes it sound like he's only just walked in from Piccadilly. So Ian's presented that piece. Keith, A, did you just want to say hello? And B, Lisa, Keith, is there anything else that you want to raise in respect of that draft document?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Graham. Yes, apologies everybody, I was a bit late. Unfortunately, it was a train from Birmingham, which delayed me, but I'm glad I got here just in time, just about. So, yeah, just arrived in the last couple of weeks as interim FT. I'm working with Lisa. We're working very much hand in hand. So, yeah, interested to see the internal audit and external audit update. I've had an opportunity to review the stat accounts and the reports. So yes, it's all clear to me, happy to be here. Did Lisa want to add anything to the reports?
The only thing I want to flag, which I'll be covering in my section shortly anyway, was regarding the pension asset that Ian has just mentioned. We do have a pending adjustment following a revised report from our actuaries, so that position will reverse back into a liability position, and that'll be shown in the final draft. But it is one of the key items that's in the draft version of the accounts.
Okay. Grand, thank you. Thank you both, and thank you, Ian. And apologies for not seeing you on the screen earlier. I did find you eventually. Good. Now, Gavin, we are talking about monitoring the effectiveness of Audit and Governance Committee, and so we are a little tight for time, and I don't want to squeeze things unnecessarily, but if there is anything that you can do to provide a summarised section 7 on the agenda, I think that would be appreciated.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll try my best. I'll try my best. I will. I was going to say to try and take it as read most of the report. I just want to point out a few things. So, for the benefit of everyone here, Gavin Legg, I am the senior lawyer at TFN. Also on the call, just quickly, we've got Jessica Burrows, who's the new lawyer that's joined the legal team as well. So Jess is just shadowing to see the different committees and meetings, just see how they operate. So straight into it. I think generally, as you're all aware, we do this. We started off with a self-assessment survey last year, and this is to measure the effectiveness of the committee. We had 7 responses this year, so that's one more than we had last year. Overall, the results are positive. An example of that is the close relationship or the relationship we have with internal and external auditors as well. In terms of keeping it brief, the results are in Appendix 1 of this report, and that sets out the members' comments as they were written within the survey responses. And then within that, we've got the officers' comments in response to those comments and the actions that we're looking to do. Paragraph 3.10 of the report sets out the proposed actions. Again, for time, the key themes that we got on actions were attendance at committee meetings. We got training for members, and as I touched upon earlier, the anti-fraud strategy. So on attendance, Helen provided an update at the start. Our colleagues are working extremely hard with counterparts and constituent authorities to recruit elected members, and I think there is some confidence there from our Democratic Services team, and a thank you to them for all the work that they're doing in that. Anti-fraud strategy, again, it has been discussed during this call. Chair, you've mentioned that you'd like it would be useful for the committee to see proactive measures in place, and I think that will, of course, be included within the remit of internal audit. But generally, I think in terms of measures we've got in place for managing fraud, it's things like officers training is in place, the segregated duties within TFN and specific controls across the different functions relating to fraud. And as Daniela touched upon, that's within the areas like finance, procurement, HR and IT to help prevent that. But again, it will be covered within the internal audit, and we do contact and we have a relationship with internal audit, so that we can look at any new fraud legislation that is going to be incorporated and is going to come into force in the future. The final of the 3 main topics is training for members. Again, this was something that came out, and there has been some progression on that. So in terms of the induction pack that was rolled out last year, there will be a refresher of that induction pack, and we're aiming to roll that out in September. Similarly, there's going to be an annual skills audit that will continue to take place, and again, that's based on a competency framework, which we'll look to discuss in September, hopefully. In terms of the development workshops that we've got in place, Chair, I've discussed these with you already. The first one's going to be on the mechanisms for developing key policies within TFN, and that includes elements of our strategic transport plan and future strategies. In Q3, there's going to be one on cyber security specifically. Councillor Baker-Rogers, I've noted your comments down, and I'll report back to our head of IT, who will be delivering that workshop to ensure that those concerns are considered within the workshop, and also to make sure that it builds in time for questions and answers as part of that workshop as well, just to answer any questions that members might have. And the final one is people strategy, pay grading and TFN culture, that will be done by our head of HR. So we'll be looking to record these sessions with members who aren't able to attend, so they can access. There's also a conversation as to whether we try and incorporate those sessions into our committee meetings, or whether we need to have separate ones. It all depends on timing, which we can discuss, Chair. I think it might be better to discuss that outside of this meeting, given the time constraints that we have. And I know,
I think so.
Yeah, and I know there has been a suggestion from you as well around a workshop on TFN governance, and the makeup of our different boards and committees might be useful as well. So that's already one that's been raised internal, and we'll look in it. I think the one final point as well is around feedback from boards to the committee. So there is a connection between TFN's chief executive and committee chair, who do meet at least annually. I think it's twice a year potentially, which is important. And I know there was a few comments around what else can be done. Is the scope to maybe seek specific feedback from board? That's something that we will come back. We'll look at internally, and we'll come back to you on as well. So I appreciate that's a whistle stop tour of that report. But if there is anything to discuss and question, then happy to take those now.
Grand, thanks, Gavin. Can I ask colleagues? I think we will undertake to communicate in advance of September's board meeting about how we actually go about delivering these workshops, whether it's a good idea to extend existing meetings or whether we need something separate if indeed we're going to record them. So let's do that offline if folk are comfortable with that. We've still got a number of things to get through. Gavin, thank you again. Sorry to squeeze the presentation a little.
Thank you. Thanks.
Please don't take it personally. Excellent. So I think Lisa, it's back to you, is it not, for the draft statutory accounts? So we are meeting, I believe, in person in December as a committee to approve these accounts. I think that's the positioning, correct?
Yes, that's right.
To you. Yeah.
Okay, so Lisa Pitt, I'm the interim financial controller, section 151 officer. So constraints of time, I shall make this reasonably brief and take the draft accounts as read. As I intimated earlier, the key points I'd like to draw out is currently the income and expenditure statement is showing as a surplus due to the reduction of the pension liability. However, we do have a pending asset ceiling adjustment as advised by our actuaries, which will be processed in time for the final accounts in December. The value of that is just short of 5 million, so it is going to very much reduce that position. In terms of balance sheet, we've got a higher debtors position due to our local authorities and the contributions that are payable to us. Lower creditors due to settlement of PAYE responsibilities, and our cash has gone up, primarily a result of receiving our 25-26 core grant first instalment in advance. And I'll take any questions if anybody's got anything in addition to what I've just raised.
I've got a question. Thank you. Right. Thank you for that, Lisa. So in 3.8, it says, in line with guidelines, we published the draft statutory accounts for public inspection for a 30-day period commencing on the 30th of June. Mm-hmm. Where are we going to be publicising them, please?
It was on the website, from what I understand.
I remember previously we have agreed to publicise them through our social media pages. Can we do that this year again, please, or look at other ways? Because I'm very conscious that we represent a very large number of people and we need to try and engage with them as much as we possibly can. Statutory accounts, as you will know, are very important. And I don't think that just publicising them on the website is enough. Thank you.
Okay. Point noted.
Thanks, Joanna. I do recall. I think previously we've actually had a stat as to how many people had accessed it. I think it was very, very low number of people had accessed it. So yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, if there is anything else that we can do in that space, Lisa, Keith, that'd be great.
Okay.
Anybody else? So yeah, just to confirm the annual governance statement, I think, presented there, Lisa, is as we saw it as a committee back in March.
Mm-hmm.
And we get the opportunity to review and hopefully approve in September.
Thanks.
Okay. Grand. Lovely. Thank you for that. So Martin, we have quarterly operating report up to March, which inevitably feels a little dated, but I did enjoy the narrative at the beginning anyway, and the update to the position on the business plan. So please feel free to take them in whatever order or detail you wish.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'll take the fact that we've, as you touched on, the quarterly operating report is the one that completed last financial year. So I'll take that as people will have read that. I think the things I would just reflect on are you'll see from the narrative that we reflect that there was a general election in the second quarter of last year. That had a number of implications in terms of some of the milestones which are recorded in the quarterly operating report, and also the fact that the timing of the spending review would have had an implication for some of the work. So that's all being captured and reflected in the quarterly operating report. I think what I would just draw attention to perhaps is some of the real successes. We delivered the work that we were commissioned directly from the department in respect of Northern Powerhouse Rail. I think we were kind of within sort of 20 or 30 grand of delivering the 5.7 million pounds worth of work. So I think as a credit to the team delivering that work, it's a lot of technical work, a lot of involvement in that, and it's a credit to them that they delivered pretty much to time to budget. I think the other thing I would just reflect on is the continued success and interest in what we call the TFN offer, whereby we help support by making tools, frameworks, models accessible to people, not just across the north, but more generally. The latest figure I saw was we were something in the order of about, since we started the TFN offer, which is about 18 months, 20 months ago now, I think we're not far off 200 requests from various authorities. We've been able to do 3/4 of those, not able to do all of them, but we've been able to do most of them, and conservatively and quantifiable a saving to public bodies in terms of using data, using consistent data sources, doing it once and using it many times, and making it available so that people can draw on experience. So I think those would be my highlights from the year that's gone past. Things that I would reflect on there, you'll see it's much more focused. We've spent time last autumn working with the constituent authorities. It's really important that what's in the business plan reflects our constituent authorities' priorities. So you will see in the business plan for this year, it's focused around things like the continuation of the TFN offer, like existing products like the EV charging infrastructure and the work we're doing there, things like the work we're doing around rail, which you've heard from in part from Katie and colleagues earlier. But you'll also see that we've stopped doing some things that we might have done in the past, and that's really a reflection of the fact that it's not appropriate for us to be doing that. You've got the mayors and the combined authorities taking leadership rightly for their city regions and therefore their regions. So there's the added value for us in getting involved is not the same. So it's concentrating resources where they're supporting the authorities rather than more general work. I think you'll see that as well. There's a lot of focus about how we need to continue to adapt. And so if I was thinking about, as we now start the beginning of the next round of business planning, because we're already at that part, some of the things that we're taking into account are things we've already touched on during the course of this meeting. The importance of understanding how the work of TfN continues to be shaped and owned by the constituent authorities, the elected mayors and leaders. The importance of thinking about how what we do aligns with activities that's being done at the northern level more widely through the Great North Partnership, which is the commitment by the political leaders to work together on those issues that need to be done at scale to support and realise the economic opportunities, not just for the region as a whole, but actually focusing on how it means, what it means for individuals. Transport is clearly important for that economic outcome, that sustainable economic outcome. So making sure we're aligned and working with the Great North is going to be even more important moving forward. We need to also, at this stage, start thinking about likely levels of funding moving forward. We've got the settlement in place for this financial year, 25-26, and we're already beginning the conversation with the department now that the headline messages from the spending review have been submitted, outlined. The departments are obviously working through what that means for their individual budgets, and we'll be working with officials in the department to make some reasonable planning assumptions as we start the business planning process for the year ahead. I think that's, Chair, all I wanted to kind of say, just by kind of a general reflection, and just leave a couple of minutes or so if there's any questions from yourself or other members.
Grand, thank you, Martin. I'll encourage. Well, Richard doesn't need any encouragement. Go ahead, Richard.
And just really quickly, conscious of time, Chair. Martin, the money that TfN gets from in terms of grants, for me, and this may be naive, but living year to year, in terms of, you know, more permanency for all the great work that this organisation does, getting grant for 3 or 5 year term, is that a possibility rather than, see the cash balances going up and then you use them through the year, then you're waiting on the decision every year. Is there any scope for that to be more, over a longer period of time? Because, in business, I wouldn't like to be dependent upon a decision every year.
In the past, we have had what we call multi-year settlements from the department. We knew that we were only going to have a 1-year settlement for this financial year because we knew there was a spending review. But Richard, just to reassure you, with the spending review announcement and setting the capital and revenue budgets for the next 3 and 5 years, we'll be looking to seek and secure a multi-year funding settlement from the department for exactly those reasons. We've had them in the past. We knew we wouldn't get it this year because of the spending review, but now the spending review is out, we'll certainly be looking for that, exactly that reason. Some of the work we do, it extends over every more than 12 months, so having that clarity allows us to plan more efficiently and effectively.
No, great, thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Martin. Anybody else? I just want one reflection on the narrative, Martin, in the business plan, and you mentioned planning assumptions a few moments ago. I think there is scope for me to make the planning assumptions more explicit within the document rather than, I think they're clearly implicit, they're clearly understood by you. But I think for the reader, I think the planning assumptions and the potential risks associated with the plan. We talk very briefly about risk management within the plan, but we don't really talk about the risks to the plan. I think both of those things might warrant a half page.
It's a fair point, Chair, and happy to kind of reflect upon that, particularly where we're delivering services or we're providing support for other partners. Then those interdependencies, I think it's a good spot to say we ought to reflect that in terms of how we describe it or include something in the business plan moving forward.
Good. Excellent. Again, thank you. And I've said it already, but that strategic context is so important to this committee, and it's so important to our understanding of how we think about risk and audit and the governance practices. So it's essential that we have this this dialogue. And I know this is the second or third meeting, Martin, that you've attended in person. So thank you for that effort as well. I think it does make a big difference. Now, entirely by accident rather than design, it's 1 o'clock, and we seem to have got through the agenda. Sorry to Gavin and others for squeezing things a little. We are scheduled to meet on the 5th of September. Detail of whether that's in person or online we can cover at a later date. I think it's currently scheduled to be in person. Splendid, thank you. We got through everything, and I think we had a reasonable amount of attendance and really good conversation. So thank you all for your contributions, and see you very soon. Thank you.
Chair, thank you.